Hello, this is Melody Maxwell, and I'm here with Dr. Wayne E. Croft Sr. for the Scholars Collaboration of the North American Baptist Fellowship. Dr. Croft, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're very excited today to talk about your book, A History of the Black Church. I don't feel no ways tired. Before we do that, I'd like to give a little bit of information about Dr. Croft. He's the pastor of St. Paul's Baptist Church in Westchester, Pennsylvania, and the Jeremiah A. Wright Senior Associate Professor of Homiletics and Liturgics at United Lutheran Seminary in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So you're a pretty busy guy, it sounds like, in addition to writing this book in your spare time.
Yes, yeah. And I did forget to give you updated information. I was promoted to full professor last semester.
Congratulations, that's outstanding. Well, I'd like to ask a few questions about the book, if you don't mind, and I'm just interested in hearing you share with the book. Share
Yes.
about the book so that our audience may be interested in reading it and learning more about the Black Baptist Church. So my first question is, what inspired you to write this book in the first place?
Yeah, so among teaching homiletics and liturgics, which is my title at United Lutheran Seminary, because there is a large contingent of Baptist students, they had to start offering Baptist history and polity. And so I was the only Baptist on faculty. And so I took on the responsibility of teaching that course. In the midst of teaching that course, there were two books. One was Frustrated Fellowship, The Baptist Quest for Social Power, which was by James Melvin Washington, and Black Baptist History, which was by Leroy Fitz. When we got to Fitz's book, which was more detailed about the Black Baptist Church, we got to one of the years where it was hard for students to purchase the book. It was out of print. Both books, James Melvin Washington's and Leroy Fitz's book, were published in the 80s. And so I remember saying to my class, we need an updated version of Black Baptist history, and I'm expecting one of you to write it. and then I thought, well, why don't I write it? And my church gave me a sabbatical for 3 months, and I took that time to really do research and use the notes that I had on Black Baptist history from teaching the course, and decided to write the book. And I felt like we were a updated version of Black Baptist history was due. And at that point in time, I felt like I was the person to write it, and here we are.
Well, thank you so much for writing it. We're so glad that you did, full of rich information. And I want to talk a little bit more about that without giving away all of the contents of the book. We want readers, people to go in and read it for themselves. But first, a question that may be obvious, but I'd like to have you to hear what you have to say, just articulate it. Why is it important to document Black Baptist history?
Well, the Black Baptist Church, to me, it's important because individuals, particularly Black Baptists, need to know who we are and where we came from. There were great strides made by the Black Baptist Church, both in the church and its community, especially during enslavement, that the Black Baptist Church, fought against and were resistant to racism. And so it helps people to understand that not only was the Black Baptist Church involved in developing itself, it was also involved in the community and what was going on in the world. And I think that is something that not just the Black Baptist Church, but the Black church itself, which is born out of social protest, is important for people to know and to learn, to know the events, to know the significant persons who were responsible for the organization of the Black Baptist Church. I think all of those things are important. To understand who you are and where you came from is of great importance.
Absolutely. And understanding the past and how it affects us in the present. And you talked about the church in the world and the importance of the Black church in the world. Can you say more about specifically the importance of the Baptist church in the Black community historically?
Yeah, Carter G. Woodson, when he refers to the Black church, he refers to it as an all-comprehending institution, which means that the Black church and the Black Baptist church in particular are known for being involved in the lives of its members socially, politically, religiously, recreationally, in all different aspects. The Black Baptist church is known for being involved in the community in ways of feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, all of those things that Jesus talks about. Is the Black Baptist church portrays those things. There's a saying for the Black church that everyone in the community may not belong to the church, but the church belongs to everyone in the community. And so it doesn't matter if you're a member or not a member. People are known to come to the church from the community to get the resources that some agencies refuse to give to them, or the lack of resources that they have becomes available in the Black Baptist church. It was where, we held our Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and Brownies, where there are Black Baptist churches, such as my former church that I pastored. We had our own daycare center. You have political forums that are held at the church. Many of our NAACP organizations, they operate out of the church and use it as their home base. And so it's very involved in the community in so many different ways and aspects.
Really like a hub for the community, a central location that is doing what Jesus asked the church to do. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Great. Well, let's get more specifically to the history that you talked about in the book, and you chronicle through the years, but I wonder if there are any specific turning points that you consider to be important in the history of the Black Baptist Church.
I think one of the most important turning points is the evolution of the Black Baptist Church, which is the Silver Bluff Church that was organized in 1773, between 1773 and 1775, it has stated. I think that was a turning point where Black Baptists begin to own their own buildings and churches where some people, may know this or may not know this, but a lot of the Black churches were pastored by white pastors. And so one of the turning points was when David George, a Black preacher, became the first Black pastor of a Black Baptist church, which was Silver Bluff. And then George Lau, who is a well-known Black Baptist pastor and missionary, founded and organized the first African Baptist church in Savannah, Georgia. And from there, you begin to have these the involvement of Black Baptist churches. Spreading to the north, you have the African Baptist Church in Boston, Massachusetts that is birthed. Then Abyssinian Baptist Church in New York City, then First African Baptist Church in Philadelphia. And all of these started to spread. Another turning point was the development of Black Baptist associations and conventions that brought about more fellowship among Black Baptists. And these associations and the convention, well, particularly the association, was very involved in fighting against enslavement. And later, the focus became missions and education. And so you start seeing the growth of this church being involved again, both inwardly and outwardly. And some of that has to do with bringing from the African heritage, bringing African heritage and African practices to America, in that in Africa, there's no separation between or dichotomy between the sacred and the secular. And so for the Black Baptist Church to be involved in the community, in the world, fighting slavery, is a part of the makeup of the church. It is really not the church and the community. It is the church and the community. It encompasses the community. And so it's all kind of one, you know, in the history of Black Baptists, and particularly and the history of the Black church.
That's really fascinating. I'll say that I learned a lot from reading your book, including the many number of churches that vie to have been the first African Baptist church or first Black Baptist church in the U.S.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then you have a lot that were known as the Second Baptist Church, because most of the First Baptist Church were white churches. And you have a number of churches that were known as the first or second or the third African Baptist Church, too, separated from the white church. And so African was often placed in the name when naming the church.
Let me ask you something else. In your book, you talk about the invaluable contributions of Black Baptist women, and that they're rarely told in history books. And so I wonder, why do you think that is? And what are some key stories of Black Baptist women that your book tells?
Well, yeah, patriarchy kind of overshadowed the gifts of women, Black Baptist women, their gifts and talents. The Baptist Church, Black Baptist Church, and probably still today, sad to say, is male dominated. And so the women were overshadowed. However, when you read my book, you will notice that the women were the pioneers for the church and for the community. Often the ones who raised the most money for missions, for education. It was the women who developed the missionaries at Spelman College, which was then Atlanta Seminary. Developed a number of women: Nora Gardner, Clara Howard, Emma Delaney. These women, all from Spelman College, who were trained to be missionaries, who went to West Africa, and spread the gospel. And then in the 1900s, a woman by the name of Nannie Helen Burroughs gave a speech at the National Baptist Convention titled "How Sisters Are Hindered in Helping." And she talked about the inequities in the convention, and about how women's equality was being denounced. And her speech was so passionate that it birthed the largest body of women in that convention, with the Women Convention Auxiliary movement, largest body of Black Baptist women gathering together. And so she was a pioneer for that. And the funding of schools that were considered, which we call HBCUs now, historically Black colleges and universities. It was the women who raised the money, and provided the resources, for this. The men just kind of said what they wanted and what they needed, and did not have as much as the resource was as effective as raising the resources and money that the women did. And so the sad thing is that a lot of the books on the history of Black Baptists and the Black church, because of this patriarchy, because of male dominance, is overshadowed, and we miss out on hearing about the valuable contribution that women made to the church and to the community.
Well, thank you for sharing about some of these fascinating stories here in our interview and also in your book. Really, really amazing women that you've talked about. I also want to ask about, in your book, you discuss the history of multiple Black Baptist associations and conventions. Oh, I think we've lost him. Dr. Croft is back now, and so thank you, Dr. Croft. I'd like to ask you about Black Baptist associations and conventions. In your book, you discuss the story of many of them. And I wonder if you could just give us a taste of this, again, without giving the whole book away, by talking a little about the history of one or two groups that were significant in Black Baptist history.
Yeah, so as you can see in the book, there were like 9 or 10 different, associations and conventions, if not more. There's the saying that as Baptists, we multiply by dividing. and, so, and so there was a lot of division that brought about the various associations and conventions. But the Black Baptist associations and its conventions originated out of a desire for racial progress and resistance to racist practices within white Baptist associations and conventions. These associations brought about not only fellowship and helping to train ministers, but again, as I said earlier, were very involved in the fight against enslavement and racism. The first one being the Providence Baptist Association, which was birthed out of Providence Baptist Church in Ohio, which is where the name came from in 1834. They were the first Black Baptist Association, and their focus was fighting against slavery that they later became known, I believe, as the Providence Anti-Slavery Convention. You had Amherst Baptist Association, which was very involved in helping those who were enslaved who migrated to Canada. And so they were in Canada helping Black Baptists, providing them with the resources that they needed as well. From the associations came these conventions, and the convention, the mother convention, was the National Baptist Convention. It came about through the consolidation of 3 other conventions, and that became the largest convention, even still today, among Black Baptists. Now, they promote that they have 8 million members, but it's much less than that, as conventions now and associations are on a decline. New generation of pastors in the Black Baptist Church are not as involved in associations and conventions as the former generation. One is they see them as being too traditional, and being kind of ruled, or the leadership being a more elderly leadership, where these young pastors don't find a place in the conventions and associations. And so that's one of the challenges that Black Baptists have in trying to revive these associations and conventions. But yeah, National Baptist Convention USA became the mother convention. And from the National Baptist Convention, I tell the story about Dr. King and one of the presidents, J.H. Jackson, and the friction between those two that caused a division that brought about what is known as the Progressive National Baptist Convention. And they used the name progressive because the president of the National Baptist Convention back then was pretty conservative, and did not think that the church should be involved in the mainstream civil rights movement, or more specifically in civil disobedience. So there's an interesting story about that period in time. J.H. Jackson was the president of the National Baptist Convention. Martin Luther King Jr. was a part of that convention, and there became almost a Saul and David relationship between the two, as King was more progressive in his action and his thoughts, where again, J.H. Jackson was more conservative. And so they had this friction, and it caused a split, because they wanted there to be, in the National Baptist Convention, they wanted to be limited terms for the president. And J.H. Jackson didn't want to give up the power. He ended up being the president of that convention for 29 years, where the Constitution said that the president was limited to 4 years. And so you can imagine the friction of someone who's only supposed to have 4 years, ended up having 29 years. And he was such a great orator that people would say before he spoke, I'm not voting for him. We need to stick to the Constitution. After he spoke, he was so great that they ended up voting for him again. And King and well-known preacher in Black Baptist circles, Gardner Taylor, went about trying to get him out of office. And that brought about, unfortunately, a fight at the convention in which one of the preachers ended up dying, who fell off the dais and had a concussion and later died. But there was a lot of friction. That tension between King and J.H. Jackson, which I hope people read the book and really see, some of this action things that go on in the conventions, was so intense that J.H. Jackson, who was also the pastor of Olivet Baptist Church, my Olivet Baptist Church in Chicago, Illinois, his church was located on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. He changed the entrance of the church so that they did not have to put on the stationery the address of Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. That's how intense the friction was between those two. And so you had all of these kind of schisms and divisions that brought about the various conventions. Like I said, the National Baptist Convention of America came out of National Baptist Convention of USA because over the rights for publishing rights. R.H. Boyd wanted the publishing board. He was chair of the publishing board, and he wanted separated from the convention. And in doing so, he ended up splitting from the convention and starting his own convention. And so you had the National Baptist Convention of America, Progressive National Baptist Convention, then later the Full Gospel Baptist Fellowship. And none of these were over a doctrine or theology, a difference between doctrine and theology. It was all over leadership.
Very interesting. I can tell you're a great teacher. I would love to be a student in your class. Thank you for sharing. And yes, there's more in the book here that others would love to read, I'm sure. I always tell my students that Baptist history is not boring, and you've shown that through some of what you've just been sharing with us.
Yeah.
I wonder, stepping back to the bigger picture, what do you think that Baptists today might learn from Black Baptist history as you've described it in the book?
I think that someone reading this book will learn not only the rich history of Black Baptists, but how eager and willing Black Baptists were willing to be involved in social justice and fight for political changes. That it was, again, involved in not only inside its four walls in the church, but also involved in the Black community. I think people will learn how important the Black Baptist Church was in fighting for social justice, for equality. I think the unfortunate thing is that they will learn is that same equality was not extended to women in the Black Baptist Church, or fight for equality was not extended to Black Baptist Women Church. There were a few who did, but was overshadowed by the majority. I think Black Baptists, people will see how Black Baptists emerge from a need to address the inequities caused by racism and racial discrimination, and how they survived, how Black Baptists survived various struggles and divisions and still remain very viable today.
And that's remarkable and exciting to see how those developments have happened. And so I wonder, just looking a bit the present and even in the future, what do you think is ahead or the future for Black Baptists?
Yeah, I think that Black Baptists have a lot of challenges. I think the church itself has a lot of challenges. Black Baptists have the challenge of dealing with us being in this now kind of post-denomination era where people are not committed to a denomination, and dealing with what we know as the nuns and the duns. But I think the future of the Black Baptist Church can be bright if it continues to be involved in social change in the world. Because this, to me, is the most socially conscious generation since the civil rights movement. And so they come to church wondering how to deal with the civil unrest, the killings of unarmed Black men or people of color. And the church has to be willing to address that. And if the Black Baptist Church is willing to continue to be a prophetic voice from the pulpit, I think its future is bright. It also must be more open to women in pastoral roles and leadership roles for it to have a bright future as well. And that is beginning to happen more than in the past. And so recently, a number of African-American women have secured the pulpit of large churches. And so, with that happening and becoming deacons in the church, which was unheard of in the past, I think if those things continue, the future looks bright for the Black Baptist Church.
Well, I look forward to seeing that bright future as it comes, and I know that others will be interested in that as well, and in reading more about the history of the Black Baptist Church. So if someone's interested in getting a copy of this book, where can they get it?
It's on Amazon. It's, Barnes and Nobles, all of the booksellers have it, but particularly Amazon and from the publisher Judson Press.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Croft, for your time today. It's been a pleasure to speak with you, and I hope that this has definitely piqued my interest in the Black Baptist Church and in your book, and I hope it's done so for others as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.